Welcome to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, where we help thought leaders like you turn conversations into conversions. I'm your host, Tom Schwab, and if the word networking makes you cringe a bit, well, you're not alone. Today, we're flipping that concept on its head. Our guest today is Kristen Nolan, a senior account manager and podcast strategist here at Interview Valet. She brings a fresh perspective to building relationships without the awkward business card exchange or wasted evenings at bad events. Kristen calls it anti-networking, and it's exactly what many high-level professionals are craving in this noisy, automated, and transactional world. In this episode, we unpack how podcast interviews can allow you to build genuine connections at scale, how they give you visibility where it matters most, and how showing up on the right shows can elevate your brand far more than showing up in the right rooms. If you've ever thought there's got to be a better way to grow your network, your authority, and your client base, this is the better way. Anti-networking. It's not about skipping relationships. It's about building the ones that actually matter. Kristen, today we're talking about networking or anti-networking, and somehow networking at times makes people cringe, and they have this whole idea that it should be a four-letter word. So I love how you're talking about anti-networking. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm not here to bash networking. I think that, there's a time and a place for everything. But I also want to offer an alternative, right? Could you imagine going and being able to get in front of 1,000 of your potential clients versus going to a networking event where you get in front of 10, people that you could potentially connect with? I think there's so much more value in your time and effort in getting in front of a larger audience of people that could potentially benefit from your product or service.
I was going to say, when you say networking, I cringe on that, right? I think we've all been to, a bad networking event. And the ones that I can think of is you get thrown in a room with, 20 random people, and you've got people just wanting to give out business cards or get your business card. And I still have business cards, but they're pre-COVID, and none of them have my beard on it. And so I know when somebody else says, "Hey, can I have your business card?" Chances are they're probably not a great client, right? My clients are the ones that are technical, they're online. So we've got to network with them where they are. So how do you do that? I mean, we talked a little bit about, quality versus quantity instead of just going to a random room in Kalamazoo with 20 people. Talk about how you can use it today to get quality.
Yeah. So, as we look at podcasting, when people are listening to a podcast, they're self-selecting, right? So they trust the host. They trust the content that the host is putting together. So as you're invited onto a podcast as a guest, you're already pre-vetted as someone that brings value to the audience. And so you're able to really share who you are, what your problem is that you solve, and then you have an opportunity to then connect with the audience in a way that they get to know you before they want to learn more about you. So I kind of look at it as, if you were a keynote speaker, right? You would have to travel a distance. You would have to take, block off your calendar of a couple of days. Whereas on the podcasting side, maybe you're blocking off an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours because you're doing a little bit of prep work to make sure that you're prepared. And then you're able to then speak to the audience in a way that makes sense to them. So they then see themselves in whatever you're talking about. So you're able to eliminate that 1 or 2 days off of your calendar into a couple of hours.
And it's interesting how you said that, because even if you're speaking at an event, right? The event organizer has already vetted you and vetted the audience, right? They see a match there. They see the value. So just by being there, you've got the authority transfer from the host to you, but also you've got the host saying, my audience is good for you, right? They're not going to bring to a real estate convention. They're not going to invite a keynote speaker that talks about, geopolitical transactions and tariffs, right? It's like, no, it's not a good fit. So, and also I sometimes think of it as it's more of like a dinner party, getting invited to a dinner party than it is just to networking, right? Because networking is transactional. The dinner party is more intimate where, hey, I've got this person that I want to introduce to my audience, to my friends, right? And let's have this conversation that's interesting to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like the traditional networking, right? And even like as you mentioned the dinner party, it's more intimate, but traditional networking tends to be more surface level, right? We're having these conversations where people are, they're getting your business card, they're, wanting to schedule with you on the spot, they're, emailing you and calling you. Whereas, a podcast like a dinner invitation or a conversation at dinner, you're able to have a more in-depth conversation. You're able to really highlight who you are as a person. So people get to know you. They like you. They go, you know what? I love Tom's personality. I want to work with Tom. So again, it goes back to that self-selection of where you're really able to highlight who you are and what you bring to the table versus, just having a simple surface conversation.
Well, and as you said that, I'm like, PTSD off of bad networking events, right? Because there are times where you start talking with somebody at a networking event and you realize they're not for me, right? No judgments or anything like that, but how can I get out of this as quickly as possible, right? And if that's on a podcast interview, that's fine. I just hit end and I find a different one. Whereas like in a networking event, it can be awkward. It's like, well, how do I just walk away without being rude? Or the flip side too, there's probably somebody in that room that I want to hear from all night, right? Can we just talk for the next hour? I want to hear all about you, right? So that idea of on a podcast, okay, that's the one I'm going to listen to. That's the one I'm going to, as I'm listening to it, look the person up online, check out their website, all that other thing. So it's the best of networking and all the best and removing the worst of the networking.
Absolutely. And I think it's an opportunity to also build a genuine connection with people. Like, as you mentioned, right? Some people are your people and some people are not. So when you're building those genuine relationships, I think people naturally gravitate towards you, right? They see you in your natural element and they want to get to know you. They want to get to know more about you. And so that's just really an opportunity to highlight that versus just having those, hey, I'm collecting business cards.
Yeah. And you had talked about, the authority that you have if you're the guest of honor, as opposed to just somebody that's attendee, right? And if we all walk into the room trying to figure out, I don't know what, dare I say, the power structure, right? Who's the leaders here? Who's the people that I want to get to know? Whereas if you're on a podcast, they've pretty much put you up on the dais there, talking with the host. So there's that transfer of authority there.
Absolutely. And I think, that is so critical because what happens is if you're consistent in being a podcast guest, your name is going to start popping up. Like I know for me, if I go and I research a product that I want, it continues to pop up in different news feeds, right? So if I am consistently being a podcast guest, my name is going to start popping up in front of my ideal clients, whether that's on podcasts or that's on, because I'm taking advantage of SEO and LMO and ChatGPT and things like that. So what happens is your online presence also starts to bulk up, which you're not going to get that from traditional marketing.
That's interesting. I remember early on we had a client and his name was the same as a NFL football player. Now guess who ranked higher, right? The NFL football player. And then the name of his company was the same as like a bad 90s rom-com. And he's like, well, how do I rank higher in social media? I'm like, well, you can change your name to somebody that's not in the NFL, and you can change your company name to something that's not a well-known movie. And he's like, well, I don't want to do either one of those. And I'm just like, then you've got to outrank them, right? You've got to be out there talking more. So when people hear your name, they hear of you, not that NFL football player. And it was interesting because as he got out there, he started to rank higher. And then when the player retired, right, his share of voice dropped down. And so he became the leader in that. It was funny because if anybody would search for the NFL player, they'd find this business coach. So it's interesting. And it's not, back then, 10 years ago when we started, that was just SEO listening for it. And today AI is doing that, right? And it's like, how much of a share of voice do you have when AI is looking for you?
Yeah. And to piggyback off of that, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but I actually have a client, when he started with us, he had written a marketing book. He was a marketing guy, everything on AI, because I will typically go in and say, tell me about who is Tom Schwab and what makes him different. And what we found is his first couple of interviews, hosts were asking him about marketing, but he had repositioned himself as a coach, like as an executive coach. And so one thing that he was struggling was that everything online said he was a marketing guy. So all the questions were he was a marketing guy. So we had to really be strategic in how we positioned him to hosts and the questions that the hosts were asking. And so at the end of his campaign, I actually went in and I said, who is this client? And it rebranded him as the coach that he wanted to be because he had put out a book and he had been consistently on podcasts that were talking about, his new, coaching. And so therefore he was able to change his presence through ChatGPT just by doing a couple of things.
Yeah. And it's almost like he was networking with different people as a different person, right? There's times I'm networking as, a little league coach with other little league coaches or a parent teacher organization. Okay. That's your brand right there. But you want to network in the rooms where your ideal customers are. And, today, as business expands, right? You don't have to live in the same town. You don't have to live in Kalamazoo to work with me. So networking nationally or globally, it's like, well, how do you do that without jumping on a plane? And that's why I love, as you talk here, there's different ways to do that.
Yeah. And, not just, from we go beyond the geographic limitations, but I also will tell you that as people, and I think you've touched on this, like some people are more introverted, right? And so as they're thinking of networking, they're cringing because they're like, the thought of going and talking to a bunch of people, I don't love doing that. But one thing that I've actually noticed being a podcast guest is that it also elevates your confidence, right? And so you get to talk to someone one-on-one, you hone the information and the content that you're sharing, and then you're able to, if you do want to go out and go to those networking events later, or you are invited to the right networking event, you have the confidence and the capabilities to speak on things because you've been doing it consistently through podcast interviewing.
Matthew Pollard, who wrote the book, The Introvert's Edge, he helped me so much with this. I'd heard him speak at an EO event, and it's like, I resonated with it because personally, I'm an introvert and, I'm an extroverted engineer, but I'm an introvert, right? So I don't want to be up all hours of the night at this party or after event. I'll have coffee with you one-on-one in the morning. And so he was talking about how you can network different ways, but he also pointed out that you've got to look at who your clients are, right? So if your clients are introverts, you're not going to find them at traditional networking events, right? They don't like being there. So you're not going to find them. And we did a lot of studies after meeting him and talking with him. And our audience, 2-to-1, or of clients, 2-to-1 self-identify as introverts. So we're not going to find our ideal clients at these networking events. But you know what they're doing? As everybody else is, going to the after hours karaoke party, the introverts are going back to recharge in their hotel room with a podcast. And it's like, wow, so I can reach them wherever they are and I don't have to leave home either. And that works for me.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful to be able to identify who your target audience is, because I think a lot of people don't do that. Right. And so I think the reason why some people don't find success in the networking arena is because they're sort of doing the like, I'm going to cast a wide net and kind of see what comes in for me. And it's this busyness, right? So you're going to networking events, you're getting business cards, you're filling your calendar, but you're not seeing the results. And I think really, if you get to the bottom of it, you have to have and be able to identify who your target audience is. And that's why the benefits come from podcast interviews, is that you really can get specific and you can niche down as deep or as, high level as you want to go.
I was talking with a client the other day, and he used an analogy that struck me. He's like, when was the last time you saw a Ferrari ad? And I was like, that's interesting. He's like, yeah, so many people are like, I want to do high ticket sales. I want to go after, the affluent people, right? Accredited investors, whatever it is, right? And they're like, and I'm going to do it with Facebook ads, and I'm going to do it, with a 3-day challenge, right? And it's like, that makes no sense, right? It may work for a small transaction to the masses, but you're not going to get the people that are driving Ferraris because they're not there, right? It's that whole idea. If you're trying to find people that you want to reach and they're at work, right? Don't advertise on daytime television. That's where you advertise to the unemployed people. So it's like that whole thing of when people are like, well, I've got to be at every networking event. I've got to be on every social media. I've got to be on, every podcast. It's like, no, you're wearing yourself out. And do you really want to be seen there? Right? There's different places. Ferrari has enough money to advertise on Facebook or on daytime TV, but they don't want to do that because A, it's a waste of money, and B, it would actually hurt their brand.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing too. I mean, I've had quite a few clients lately say, come to me and say, hey, I've been reached out to by this podcast host, I'd like to be on their show. And I think it's important to, as we're also talking about what podcast to be on, does it align with your brand? Does it, is the host, going to provide value? Because as we mentioned before, the host is pre-vetting you and saying, yes, you're a fit. And so if you're going on podcasts that don't make sense and people are looking for you and you're on a podcast about something that has nothing to do with who you are, what your brand is, that can also be a deterrent for potential clients go, I'm confused, So it's really important to ensure that, you're sending the right message online and through your efforts as well.
Yeah. And it's that consistency. And like you said, you'll confuse people, right? You'll confuse the hosts of like, who is this person? Why, if they talk about everything. And I think even more important today, you'll confuse the AI because it's going to keep looking out there and going to say, well, who is this person? Right? They do a little bit of everything. I can't figure out what they do, so I'm not going to promote them. Right? And it will just confuse them. So that networking of you want to be consistent, you want to be in a place where it raises your profile every time to be seen there.
Absolutely. And then, as we sort of talk about that online presence, I think one thing that a lot of people miss when it comes to podcast interviews is that promotion piece. So one other thing that you get, right? If you're going to networking events, it's very transactional. You're not really getting anything else from it. Whereas if you're going onto a podcast interview, you have content that can be repurposed and used over and over and over again. So you're also freeing up time that you would be spending making videos that, short videos that you're putting on social media, because you can pull those clips, you can take those quotes and you can then promote those there. And I think this is a huge piece of what a lot of people miss is that they think, okay, I'm showing up on a podcast, I'm hitting record, we're stopping, I'm saying thank you. Maybe I send a thank you card, maybe I promote it once and that's it. And then they can't figure out why they're not seeing the results from that. So I think, on the other side of things is that you get so much content that you can then take that content and turn it into so much more beyond just the interview once it stops.
Yeah. And it's really that idea of, is this an event? Is this a transaction? Or is this the start of a great relationship? Right? Because people know the difference, right? If it's very, very transactional, you can feel it, right? And the hosts feel it, right? Are you just here to use and abuse my audience? Are you just, coming into this networking event and you've got 3 more rooms to hit tonight? People can sense that. Or, when they say, let's continue this conversation. It was so great to meet you. How can we stay connected? It's that same thing, right? This is the start of a relationship. And what I love about podcasts is that everybody opted in for it, right? There's no other medium where you can say it's 100% opt in, right? There's a limited number of TV stations, so I had to pick something, or it was in the magazine that showed up, so there's a limited number of articles, so I had to look at that. No, everybody that listens to that interview didn't do it by mistake, and if they listened to the end, they did it that intentionally too.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a client the other day, which I thought this strategy was very smart. He sent an email. He and the host were going back and forth, and he said, hey, and hosts will often ask, do you have any other people that may be a good guest for my podcast? But he said, do you know of any other podcasts that you think I would be a good fit for? And would you be willing to make the introduction? And I felt like that was so genius because it goes beyond just that transaction of like, hey, I'm a guest on your podcast. And one other thing that I also always advise my clients to do is as soon as you're invited to be a guest on a podcast, connect on social media, right? Follow their stuff, see what they're talking about. See what's important to them, like their posts, comment on their posts. So that way, you're developing a relationship and it's not transactional. And so it then takes it from this, if you're going to a traditional networking event, it just takes it to another level where you're able to really connect and really get to know someone on a more deep level than just that transactional basis.
Yeah. And what I want to finish up with here is the return on investment, right? Because this is the podcast interview marketing show. And marketing, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So let's talk about the ROI. What's the purpose of networking either in person or doing it digitally over podcast interviews?
Yeah. So, to be honest, you don't necessarily have a way to quantify what you're getting when you're doing in-person networking. Whereas when you are doing podcast interview marketing, you have tangible metrics that you can kind of look at, right? You can look at download numbers. You can look at, if you have a welcome page as a guest, you can see what kind of traffic you're getting. Are you seeing an increase in social media engagement? Are you seeing people signing up to talk to you because they heard you on a podcast and they said, hey, I love what you said, Tom. I want to work with you. Let me schedule a call with you. So there are so many ways for you to quantify what that looks like versus just showing up and grabbing a bunch of business cards.
Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy there, because if you went to a traditional networking event, how would you measure the results? Because if you measure the results of, I got 57 business cards, right? Well, what does that prove, right? Unless you collect business cards, it's not going to help you, right? How many follow-up conversations did you have with that? How many of those led to sales? Did you get introductions? So really looking at what you're there for, not just the activity. And I think too often people will use bad podcast guesting. And I don't like that word, but that's what they'll do. They'll do podcast guesting like they do networking, right? Last week I did 5 networking events, or last week I did 5 podcast interviews. Well, what kind of results did you get? Well, I got 250 cards, or, I went on the podcast and, they say I talked to 2 million people. Probably not, right? The difference is, it's like, what came of that, right? Well, off of the podcast, I had this many people go to my welcome page. I had this many people download. I had this many people follow me on social media and reach out, right? And it's that conversations, because at the end of the day, you're going to networking events to drive business. You're going to podcast interviews to drive business. So don't count the number of virtual business cards you get. Count the amount of sales that you get from each one.
Absolutely. And I think, it's really seeing what moves the needle. and what allows you to, get in front of the right audience and allows you to, then provide and connect. I think it also comes down to that connection, right? So do you find more value in connecting with, one or two people, or do you find more value with being able to connect on a deeper level with, the host, and then also have all of these people kind of listening in and getting to know you better and saying, wow, I really liked what Tom said. I want to get to know him better. I'm going to go visit his website. I'm going to go learn more about him. And I think that's what it is. It's planting seeds is what I call it.
Well, you gave me a different way of looking at networking, in this AI world, in this digital world. And like so many things in category design, once you see that lens in a different way, it's hard to ever go back. It's like, why would I want to drive across town to just do old fashioned networking when I could get on a podcast interview and really network with the people that make a difference?
Absolutely. And, one other thing that I like to mention about this is, everybody is busy, right? With podcast interviews, you have a lot more, availability to control your schedule, right? A lot of times if you're going to a networking event, it's at a specific time. You got to show up at 7 a.m. You got to show up at 7 p.m. Whereas with podcasting, you're getting a scheduling link from the host. So you're going to be able to go, okay, this works this time works best for me. Or, hey, I have a client that just came in and, I need to prioritize my client. Let me see if I can shift this to 30 minutes or something like that. So it allows you a little more flexibility, in your schedule versus just, kind of being forced to show up somewhere at a certain time.
Well, and as you were saying that, it was like, and your clients too, right? The networking event may be at 7:00, but so is baseball practice, right? I can't be there, but if you can time shift, right? I can listen while I'm driving to the baseball practice, or I can, I can't think of any other one where you could listen at the speed you want, where you want to pause, go back. There are a lot of problems in the world, but there's no better time to be alive.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Well, if that didn't change how you think about networking, I don't know what will. Kristen Nolan just gave us all permission to ditch the outdated rules and build something far more powerful. Real connections that scale. Let's face it, the traditional networking model is broken. It's broken for most of us, especially the introverts. It's inefficient, it's exhausting, and worst of all, it doesn't match how today's world actually works. Anti-networking, though, through podcast interviews, as Kristen laid out, lets you bypass the business card shuffle and speak directly to the people who want to hear you. So here's your next step. Stop thinking about how many people you can meet. Start thinking about where your ideal audience already trusts the hosts and how you can show up there as an expert guest. Podcast interviews give you authority, reach, content, and credibility all in a single scalable conversation. And unlike traditional networking, the value doesn't vanish the moment the event ends. You can repurpose it, share it, keep showing up long after the mic goes cold. As Kristen said, this isn't about being everywhere. It's about being intentional. So ditch the hustle and start networking smarter, not harder.